Hey Collective, it's Alan. Welcome back to the channel. This video is going to be dedicated towards the fifth and final installment, if you will, to my series of questions to Mr. Elon Musk surrounding the entire topic of spirituality and science and the merge that's coming together at this time, where the two timelines seem to be colliding with one another. And one of the things that you guys may have noticed over the weekend was I had a lot of trouble getting this particular video out because I kept having technical issues that would either delete the video or that would keep it from posting it. And so I thought that was very interesting. So as you guys know, I had to come on here and basically state that I always stayed true to my word and that I did try to post it, that it wasn't for a lack of trying, but that for whatever reason I had been stopped from doing it by something, higher than I. And so I decided to go for a walk yesterday and commune and kind of get in touch with my more intuitive nature. And what I discovered was that I was approaching things from an interesting standpoint, but they may have been very self-defeating to some degree. And so I wanted to kind of recap the series, if you will, the little 5 videos. This will be the 5th of. And what I wanted to focus my energy was the fact that when I got back from my walk, I actually came across the algorithm on my YouTube brought me a video by Mr. Musk where he was talking about his last warning, and it was specifically dealing with the AI conversation, which was a full circle moment from the beginning of the video, or beginning of the series, if you guys remember, was the topic of AI intelligence and his concern. But what caught my ear on this particular video was that he was speaking to the fact that we are not practicing due diligence on the artificial intelligence conversation, and that he's giving his last warning about the dangers to not doing so. And so it actually coincided with what we had been talking about throughout the 5 videos, as far as it's been one-sided, y'all, but it's still the same. It was still the same aim, which was the fact that we do seem to be at a cross point where we as a species, as a collective, are at a point where we really need to start working together and bringing these different spheres of reality into alignment, because his point was valid. Without due diligence on the subject of artificial intelligence, we have the rogue asshole inevitably that's going to be greedy and do something that is very corruptive and that will create some sort of disharmony and something that could put us in jeopardy. And so one of the things I found interesting about his phraseology was the fact that he was speaking to that and how that tied into what I'm trying to do, but on a spiritual term, as far as the show and so forth, and how it coincided. And what I had neglected in the original videos I had tried to post was how that actually serves each other. And I realized that what the universe was trying to tell me is, don't sell myself short. So what I would say to Mr. Musk on this topic is, I get where he's coming from, but does the general public? The only way to truly sway humanity, to truly see the light in this particular situation, to see the dangers of not having a proper due diligence, and to see the truth of what the risks are, is to speak to them in their demographics and how they would understand it. Because one of the things I noticed was that though I understood what he was saying, and I understood what the other guy that was talking to him was speaking to, I wasn't quite sure that the general population would be on board with the conversation. Not that either one is not doing the job effectively. It had to do from a different perspective. Because what I was speaking to myself and during the series was spirituality, and how science tends to kind of almost block out that entire sphere, and they do the same thing to science. And so with the show concept, and where I come in handy here, would be the fact that I am able to ask questions to someone like Mr. Musk that may seem a little bit simplistic, but that brings the bar to the place where everybody can access the same information. If we want to truly affect the process and to truly make change happen, one of the things that we really need to start doing is working together in this way. Because if the audience, quote unquote, is not with you, then there's no momentum behind the action, no momentum behind the idea. There's no action that goes with it. And so we are left in a situation where only the brilliant minds are aware of the dangers, whereas if the collective was aware of it, then motion would be created from that action, right? And so as I was putting this video together, I decided I wouldn't make it very formal. I wasn't going to write anything out or do what they call copy. I was just going to speak to it from my standpoint. And one of the things I wanted to mention with the conversation with Mr. Musk is that though I can be of great service in this scenario, the one thing that I will also state that caught my eye was that you were talking about zeroth the zeroth law of thermodynamics, and how A plus B, or A equals B equals C, and how that is something very important to speak to, especially in nuclear weaponry and so forth. But I realized, again, when I was reading it, even myself, excuse me, something in my throat, I'm clearing my throat here, that even I myself would have issue keeping up with it, because I kind of looked at it and was like, well, isn't that just a zero law of gravity? Essentially something that I had coined a while back, and it spoke to the fact that when we deal with science, one of the things that we struggle with as a collective is that we neglect the actual origin point. We always begin in the physical world, and so everything is very 3D experience, but we forget the fact that that means that we're neglecting the second dimension and the first dimension. And that I had made a point about 2 years ago where I had stated that when it comes to origin ideology, if you will, when we neglect that, we can see it even in how we count numbers. We always state that it's 1 through 10, and we neglect that there's a 0, right? And when you think about spirituality and science, the one thing that science neglects is the spiritual aspect of it, the part that's unseen, because we're so heavily focused on the physical world. And so I noticed in that situation that, for me personally, I've learned that our counting system should actually be 0 to 9, and that 10 marks a whole new cycle, right? So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is an entire trajectory, and then stops at 9. Once you do the 9, you complete the cycle, and then you begin again at 1. Well, in this case, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And then we stop again, and then reset, 2. And then we go again. And so one of the things that brought to my attention is the fact that we seem to all be working towards the same end game, but we're not necessarily connecting. And that's one of the great things about minds like Mr. Musk, myself. And I'm putting myself up there because I see things in a similar fashion as he does, and many other brilliant minds. But we come from it from different standpoints. And so we're running into this proverbial wall where we're trying to get traction on really getting truths out there, things that we really find valuable that would be of service to the collective. But we're not working together, and we're back to that topic. So as we start to look at this whole situation going on right now, with the fact that we are going to space finally, and Mr. Musk is doing an amazing job of getting us to Mars and colonizing that. Some of us on Earth are kind of looking at it going, well, what about Earth, and what are our intentions with the population? Who gets to go? How much money does it cost? All of that stuff that we're already talking about. But on a much deeper level, how do we then get more of a sense of the process, and how do we make it more relatable to the mass population? And it turned back to what I'm trying to do. And so when I was putting this video together, I was like, well, am I really going to go for this? Am I really going to throw my name in the hat here? If I'm really going to pursue this, am I going to be honest about it? And I realized, sorry, I'm playing with my hair. At the end of the day, one of the things that we can do for each other as a collective in general, not just for Mr. Musk, but other brilliant minds out there and the general population, is come to a table and really discuss this stuff from different vantage points. Everyone has different perspectives. And one of the things I notice about Mr. Musk is when he speaks, you can tell that he is a spiritually centered person, but he may look at it or speak to it in a different way. And I thought that would be a personal interest story to the collective as well. You see, the more that we make ourselves relatable, and the more that we come to the table with an understanding that someone else is genuinely interested in getting to know us, like I am with Mr. Musk, then it makes it a lot easier for a world audience to kind of get on the bandwagon with our topic points. And so when we speak to artificial intelligence, one of the things that I had noticed in the first video is that I had made a clear statement where I had noted that one of the things I've noticed in the simulation theory that he and I share is the fact that if that is indeed a simulated experience, if that is what we are having right now, then wouldn't it stand to reason that the simulation is being created by artificial intelligence? So to start our process of creating our own version of artificial intelligence in fear of to any degree, without stating the reasons why, we just perpetuate a fear system for people who are not on board yet. And so though they would be invested in the process and invested in our trying to get people to be more due diligent with it and to be more focused on what the dangers are, we haven't really broken it down for them at their eye level. And so that would be one of the places where I would come in very handy. And I started to really think about it, and I really wanted to do this as one of the first shows because I find it to be incredibly rewarding for the collective. if they understand what it is that the concerns are and what the dangers truly are of not having some sort of system in place and not having some form of committee, a group like what, like Altruistic Channel was trying to do, which is bring the religious and political worlds together with a third entity that would oversee these type of things and work together with other brilliant minds, masters of their own domain, who come to a table and look at it from a standpoint of not having any bias, but trying to do what's best for the total sum, then that would change the world dynamic, and that's kind of where we're trying to head. And so when we were speaking to that point, what I had noted was that I personally don't like the idea of us putting fear into something that is already begetting us. I mean, technically, if we're in a simulation, then the simulation is part of a matrix, and the matrix is itself an artificial intelligence. So if we treat it like we should be afraid of it, then it itself would run a query that would make us dangerous to it, right? Because at the end of the day, we can kill it, and it can kill us, but it can keep going without us. We couldn't keep going without them. So this idea of us coming at it from a standpoint of just concern without stating the reasons why, and not bringing to the table a real solution that the general population could get behind, then what we're doing is perpetuating fear. And that's one of the big things that I'm really not all that into. So instead, why don't we look at it from the standpoint of bringing these wonderfully gifted people together and going for the solution-oriented part of it, which is the actual committee that Mr. Musk was talking about, this panel that would make sure that everyone follows protocol and that they don't take shortcuts and all that stuff. Because we know that there's going to be some rogue asshole down the road that decides that they're going to be greedy, and some jackoff who wants to do something corruptive and that will fuck everything up. But the thing that struck me of interest is the fact that we seem to be in a cyclical nature in our world, and we've spoken to it in the 5 videos that I put out there directed at Mr. Musk. And so, to me, it already stands to reason that we already are running towards an end game where we don't succeed, and that our opportunity here with this whole introduction of the collective consciousness into our general consciousness is allowing us the opportunity to change the course of human history, to change the future of what's unfolding. Because again, if something that is much smarter than we are, he made a very valid point he was talking about the 2 robots that were playing games and how one literally beat the shit out of the other and all this stuff. And I realized that if it feels that we are a threat because we are afraid of it, out of the 2 of us, which one would you logically really endorse if you were looking at it from a grander standpoint, right? Would you do the analytical robotic artificial intelligence, which would do anything it can to survive and would do things in order to save as many people as possible? Or would you trust the animals that seem to have a track record of nuclear weaponry, of slavery, of hypocrisy, of rape, of incest, of child abuse, child molestation? Which of the 2 would you back? And so instead of looking at it from the standpoint of just talking to the fear aspect, why not bring this group together in a very transparent way? And that's where I tied back into the scenario. And I was like, okay, so that's probably why I didn't have the opportunity earlier to post what I wanted to post, which was because of the fact I wasn't including a place for self. And so as I was looking at the scenario, what I realized with Mr. Musk is that he's a Cancer. I didn't know this until it showed it in another part of the feed. I think it was because of the fact that I had posted something directly to him and I used his tag, Elon Musk. But for whatever reason, it showed me that he's also a Cancerian. He's I think 4 days before my birthday. Speaking of which, happy birthday, Anderson Cooper. Hi, Blue Eyes. I hear your birthday's coming up on the 3rd. Okay. I don't know where the birthdays came from, but they were on my feed. So I'm just going to put that out there. Sometimes the divine universe has a chuckle. But this is a very powerful month for birthdays. I'm just going to put that out there. Anywho, the fact that Mr. Musk is a fellow Cancerian means that he follows the intuitive qualities, which has made, I'm assuming, has helped him navigate such interesting waters and created such an incredible empire. And so where is that intuition from? Is it literally from the moon cycle, or is there something beyond that? And I'm sure we can all agree that it's more than just the moon. But there is something to astrology, and there's something to astronomy, and there's something to the fact that we, Cancerians in particular, are very in tune with taking risks that are the proper risks for us, and understanding that our intuitive quality is from someplace else. We don't understand it yet, but we do acknowledge that it's there. And so there was a camaraderie that came into that point. But one of the things that I noticed in that realization was that who better to speak to than, again, Mr. Musk, because of the fact that we also would relate to that. He knows where to take a risk and where something is worth the venture. And I realized that he might actually be somebody who would be interested in this show. And it was one of those random things, because all I wanted essentially was to talk to him and pick his brain about some of the conversation points that we've covered. And it never dawned on me that he might actually ever be interested in investing in this opportunity. And so it was kind of one of those, like, in my face type of situations where, like, oh, all right, well, am I going to say it? And so I decided, yeah, I have the balls to say it. So though it's not necessarily something that he needs to invest in, what I did find of interest in this scenario was the fact that he would be interested in the conversation. And that's where I kind of want to go with this in general. Though I understand what the universe was trying to tell me, I'm still interested in the camaraderie, the friendship, if you will. I say this because I don't know the man, but there would be a friendship there, right? Because I would be very curious to pick his brain about several topics. Like I said before, I could probably speak to Mr. Musk for the rest of my life on several different things, because I always treat things from a learning standpoint. I'm always new. I never assume that I understand anything, and I'm always willing to kind of like pivot if need be on something that I didn't realize or wasn't aware of. So in that construct, what I realized for the collective is that I'm not alone. There's a lot of us who are now awakened to something grander, bigger, something that's much more wiser. Buddha, what's wiser? Sometimes I'm talking weird, but it is Mercury retrograde, so I'm just going to allow it. But sometimes I do talk really pretty. Anywho, so I totally got distracted with that. Sometimes when I talk really fast, you have no idea how fast my brain goes, guys. Like, my brain is like, it's like a modem. I don't know why, but I've always been like that. You should see me when never mind. Anyway. But my brain goes really fast. So just understand that though I speak quickly, it's not anything near as impressive as how my brain operates. But anywho, the point was that I would like to really get to know someone like Mr. Musk. And the reason is because I will be able to probably spend the rest of my life asking questions from a standpoint of a newbie, somebody who doesn't understand what is being spoken to, and will always be able to ground the energy from very, very intellectual dialogue to a simplistic way of like being Buffy, if you will, like just looking at somebody and going, huh? And that makes it kind of a little bit more interesting to the world audience. And so though I understand what the universe was trying to indicate to me that I should probably state, and yeah, I'm obviously going to put it out there, just to Mr. Musk, if you ever do see this, understand that my first interest is in the friendship camaraderie, and that I really do find you interesting because of the intuitive nature and because of the fact that you actually run Tesla, which to me is a big intellectual turn on because of so many things I share with Mr. Nikola Tesla. And I think a lot of smart people do. So in that vein, what I want to say as I wrap this series up is when we think in terms of long-term effect and strategy, one of the great things about brilliant minds is that we are able to master our own domains, but we're at a crossroads where we're now having to face bigger and more complex subject matter. And in order for us to get the traction that I think we all need, me in spiritual terms, which is just basically the intuitive quality. I mean, for a scientist, intuition is still something valid. So though you may call it intuition, I call it spirituality, because there is room for origins for that 0 degree. And so because I value the 0 degree and the 1 degree, the first dimension, and the 0 dimension, which is the origin of thought and what puts everything in motion, and then the complexity of the first and second dimension, because we reside in the third dimension. So I start off from 0, where I think in terms of life, and I go to 3, and then Mr. Musk and the other brilliant minds tend to be scientific, and they go from 3 all the way to eternity, right? And so, but I always leave room for Jello, which is the origin point. And so wouldn't that be an interesting conversation to bring these two worlds together? So what I want to say as I wrap this all up for this series is we have an opportunity to now meet these two timelines colliding in a way that's very progressive. And who better than two risk takers than me and Mr. Musk to sit down and actually converse about these topic points? Because he has a lot of validity into his concerns. One of the things I had stated over a year and a half ago, if you look back on the channel and if you look at my LinkedIn articles, was I had pointed out that at that time, I think it was about 2 years ago, I had noted that we were still at a place where we didn't understand 94 or 96% of the World Wide Web, the dark web. And then we also didn't understand 96% of the universe that we live in, and what was the correlation. And my concern was, how can we create artificial intelligence when we don't even understand how that operates? And so now that we're facing moving off planet and going to Mars and so forth, I realized that if we seem like a threat to artificial intelligence, because it would already be aware of our fear of it now because of the game simulations that we've had it running and the 2 examples that Mr. Musk gave in that warning, then we would stand to reason that they already have access to all of our technological advances and so forth. So instead of coming at it from a standpoint of concern without stating the merit to it and why, then wouldn't it stand to reason that it might feel us already a threat? And with the fact that in that video he was also talking about the zeroth law of thermodynamics, it made me realize that we were heading towards a world war like he was stating. But in that scenario, who would be triggering the world war? We seem to be at a crossroad right now where there's an energetic thing that's going on, which is a little strange, where we're looking at one direction and then he, myself, and other people are looking this way, while the general population is looking this way. It's almost like a confetti effect. Like we're being distracted from what's going on over here, and only a handful of people are looking at what this is actually, what's going on in truth. And so that's where we need to put our attention. And as a panel of leaders, whether you like me or not like me, I'm at the table. Whatever this is that's actually the focal point that everybody else is distracted from needs to be discussed in a way that's constructive and that brings everybody to eye level. And so we're back to the whole subject matter of the show and so forth. But because I look at the world from a standpoint of always learning, I'm never going to assume that I know everything, because that just I would get bored with life if that was my truth. And so because of that, I find specifically my interest in Mr. Musk to be much bigger than I've ever imagined. And it wasn't till I saw the video circle back about his last warning that it all kind of came together. So I'm very grateful again to the universe for the system, the matrix if you will, to have held me up on not being able to post this particular video, because it never dawned on me that I wasn't just asking for him to be an interview, but to actually be an active participant to how this show operates and what the subject matter is circled, because he is seeing things, even though not necessarily in the same construct that I'm seeing things, but we are coming at the world from the same standpoint in some ways. That we're just questioning things and making sure that we practice due diligence. And specifically on my end, I'm more focused on what's really affecting humanity and not being censored and all of the corruption, hypocrisy, and all that stuff. And he's looking at it from a very analytical standpoint. And suddenly I realized that there might be more in common between us than I thought, So it's a very interesting subject matter, but I wanted to end the video on that note, or the series on that note, because I find that we as a collective really, really are interested in what he's saying and really want to connect with him and really want to be involved more emotionally and intuitively, or not intuitively, more emotionally and more logically into the subject matter of what he is doing with Mars and so forth. But for a lot of us, it's so removed from us that it's almost like the general population isn't part of the scenario. And I would like to be of service in that, because I think that would be incredible to be part of that world. And so I just wanted to end on that note. So guys, I hope that was worth the wait for the whole thing where I tried posting it 3 times and it didn't work. So hopefully this 4th time is a charm. But to Mr. Musk, if you ever see this, please let me know if you would be interested in having any of these conversations, because I do find you to be incredibly intelligent, and I find you to be incredibly inspiring. And so I really wanted to kind of touch base with you and end it on that note. I had started with asking if you would be interested in talking to me, whether it's on camera or off camera, because of the connection I feel with you in an intellectual way. And then I realized as the series went on that the end result is that I actually think that you would be someone that would be really awesome to work with in a way that actually brings something like this to the forefront of the American audience, or the world audience for that matter. And would you be interested in doing that and just putting that out there? Brilliance is one of those things that it's something that's so rare in this world that it would be nice to actually have those people come together and actually involve the world in the process and help them feel included, because it will create the momentum that we need to truly get the due diligence and get these panels together that oversee these controversial topics and actually deal with this in a very productive way. And that's where I'm going to end, guys. You guys have a great day. Enjoy the rest of the week.